6 years of marriage, one sealed folder marked dissolution, and a graduation party with 200 guests watching. When Dana Ferris's sister stood up with a microphone and announced that Dana's marriage was over, she had no idea what was actually inside that folder. By the time the truth came out, it wasn't Dana's life lying in pieces on the lawn. It was her sister's. Stay with this one till the end. You will not see where it lands. Comment the city you're watching from tonight. The tent on the Ferris lawn was white and enormous. The kind of rental that cost more for one afternoon than Dana's car payment for a year. Strung with warm bulbs that made everyone look a little more golden than they actually were. Dana stood near the dessert table in a navy dress she'd owned for 4 years, holding a glass of lemonade she wasn't drinking, watching her sister work the crowd like a politician 3 weeks from an election. Piper Ferris had graduated from law school 2 days ago, magna cum laude, and she had spent every hour since making sure nobody forgot it. The banner over the tent said, "Congratulations, doctor." No, not doctor. Piper wasn't a doctor, but she'd insisted on a font size for Piper Ferris, JD. That made the rest of the sign look like an afterthought. Their mother had paid for the tent. Their father had paid for the caterer, money he did not have, though nobody at this party knew that yet except Dana. Dana had known for 11 months. She'd known since the afternoon she drove to Wexford Hardware to pick up paint and found her father sitting alone in the back office with the lights off, staring at a stack of past due notices like they were a diagnosis. He'd looked up at her with an expression she'd never seen on him before, not sadness, something worse, something like apology, and asked her not to tell her mother, not to tell Piper, not to tell anyone. She hadn't. Now she stood in her sister's spotlight, sipping lemonade she didn't want, watching Piper laugh with her boyfriend's parents, the Averleys, who owned 3 car dealerships and a piece of the county's only private airfield, and who Piper had been dating for exactly 7 months and referring to as my future in-laws for at least 5 of them. Robert Averley ran a hiring committee at Holloway and Finch, the largest firm in the state. Everyone at this party knew that. Piper had made sure everyone at this party knew that. Dana's husband Theo found her by the cake table, 2 plates in hand, one with a slice cut too thin the way Dana liked it, one piled generously the way he liked his. "You've got the look," he said quietly, handing her the plate. "What look?" "The look where you're doing math in your head instead of eating cake." She almost smiled. Almost, because he wasn't wrong. She had spent the last 3 days doing exactly that kind of math, sitting at the kitchen table after their kids were asleep, running numbers on a refinancing structure with a business attorney named Marcus Odell, who had gone to college with their father and still, 26 years later, owed him a favor from a night neither of them talked about. The math had finally worked. That morning, 40 minutes before they left for this party, Dana had signed the last page of a folder that would quietly save her father's store from foreclosure without him ever having to stand in front of his family and admit he'd nearly lost it. The folder was in her tote bag, 12 feet away, hanging on the back of a folding chair. She had brought it because she and Theo were meeting Marcus for a final signature Sunday morning straight from church, and she hadn't wanted to make 2 trips across town. It was a plain manila folder. On the cover, in Marcus's cramped lawyer handwriting, was a case caption for the holding company they'd formed 11 months ago to buy the note on the store before the bank could sell it to a developer. Ferris Holdings, LLC, dissolution of entity. The dissolution wasn't a divorce. It was the last step of a rescue. Once the refinance closed under the store's own name again, the temporary shell company that had held the debt no longer needed to exist. Dissolving Ferris Holdings meant the plan had worked. Piper found the folder 40 minutes later, looking for a phone charger. She did not ask permission to go through Dana's bag. She never had. It was a habit left over from childhood, from the 2 years she'd spent convinced Dana was hiding something more interesting than she was. A note from a boy, a bad grade, anything that would even the scales between the sister who did everything right and the sister everyone assumed did everything first. Piper unzipped the tote, found the charging cable tangled around the folder, and pulled both out at once. The folder's cover slid half open in her hand. She saw 2 words in bold at the top of the page beneath: petition for. She saw the word Ferris twice, separated by a V. She did not see the rest, because at that exact moment her mother called her name from the microphone stand to come cut the second cake. And Piper, quick, sharp, always 2 steps ahead of her room, did not stop to read further. She stopped to calculate. By the time she crossed the lawn to the small stage the DJ had built for toasts, Piper Ferris had built an entire story in her head using 2 words and her sister's face from across a party. She believed she had found something enormous. She believed, God help her, that she had found something she could use. The toasts started at 7. Their mother went first, tearful and proud, thanking the Averleys for coming, thanking Piper's professors, thanking God. Robert Averley's wife Caroline said a few warm words about how thrilled they were to watch Piper join such a promising future. Then Piper took the microphone herself, and the tent went quiet the way it does when everyone senses the featured event is finally starting. She thanked her parents. She thanked her professors. She made a joke about bar exam nightmares that got the laugh it was built to get. And then, with the easy, practiced pivot of someone who had rehearsed exactly this moment in a mirror, she said, I also want to take a second, because family is what tonight is really about. Some of you know my sister Dana is going through something really hard right now. Dana's stomach dropped before she understood why. She and Theo are separating, Piper said, into a microphone. In front of 200 people, her voice pitched into that particular register reserved for announcements meant to sound generous while landing like a blade. I saw the paperwork today. I wasn't going to say anything, but I think it's important that we don't pretend everything's perfect all the time, you know? I think it's brave, actually, and I want Dana to know that whatever she needs, if she needs somewhere for the kids to stay, if she needs anything, my door is open. Always. The silence that followed had a texture to it. Dana felt it against her skin like a change in air pressure. 200 faces turned toward her in the warm bulb light, and she watched every expression arrive at the same place by a different road. Confusion, then concern. Then that particular hunger people get when they think they're about to witness something real. Her mother's hand went to her mouth. Her father, seated near the front, went pale in a way that had nothing to do with Dana and everything to do with the folder he did not yet know had been misread, and everything to do with fear that somehow, impossibly, his secret was the thing about to spill open in front of everyone he knew. Theo, beside Dana, went very still. What? He said, quietly, to her, not to the tent. What is she talking about? Dana didn't answer right away. She was looking at Piper on the little stage, microphone still raised, chin tilted at an angle that told Dana her sister believed, completely, that she had just done something kind. Caroline Averley leaned toward her husband and murmured something behind her hand. Robert Averley's expression did not change, but Dana, who had spent a childhood reading rooms because reading rooms was the only power available to the daughter who wasn't the favorite, saw exactly what crossed behind his eyes. He was recalculating, not about Dana, about Piper, about what kind of person announces a family member's private pain to secure a room's sympathy on the night that room was supposed to be about her. Dana? Her mother said, voice small. Sweetheart, is that... You didn't say anything. Dana set down her lemonade. She could feel Theo's eyes on her, could feel the specific, quiet panic of a man whose marriage had just been declared over in front of everyone he'd ever met, by a woman who was not his wife, based on information he'd never seen. She thought about a dozen ways to answer. She thought about correcting Piper, right there, on the spot, folder in hand. Truth laid bare in front of the Averleys, and the caterers, and the DJ, and her father's fragile, unfinished secret. She thought about her father's face. We'll talk about it later, Mom, Dana said, evenly, loud enough to carry but not raised. Piper misunderstood something. I didn't misunderstand anything, Piper said into the microphone, a flicker of something defensive crossing her face now, because a room's sympathy is a fragile current, and she could feel it wavering. I saw the papers, Dana. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm trying to support you. You're on a stage, Theo said, low enough that only the people close to the front could hear it, with a microphone. A ripple of something, not quite laughter, something more uncomfortable, moved through the closest tables. Piper's cheeks went pink. She set the microphone back on its stand harder than she needed to, and the feedback squealed once through the tent before the DJ cut the sound. And for a moment, the only noise was 200 people pretending to check their phones. Dana picked her tote bag up off the folding chair. The folder was still there, cover half open the way Piper had left it, and Dana looked at it for a second longer than she meant to. Then she closed it, tucked it back into the bag, and reached for Theo's hand. We're not staying for cake, she said quietly. They left through the side gate so they wouldn't have to walk past the head table. In the car, Theo sat with both hands on the wheel and didn't start the engine for almost a full minute. I need you to tell me there's nothing, he said finally. I need you to just tell me, because I've been standing in that tent for the last 5 minutes trying to remember if I did something, said something. There's nothing, Dana said. I promise you there's nothing. It's not about us. Then, what is it about? She looked at the tote bag in her lap, at the corner of the folder just visible through the unzipped top. It's about Dad, she said. And I need you to trust me for 1 more week before I can tell you the rest of it, because it's not only my secret to give away. Theo studied her face in the dim glow of the dashboard lights for a long moment. 16 years of knowing this woman, since college. Since the diner where she used to do her problem sets alone in the back booth because she said the noise helped her think, had taught him exactly one lesson better than any other. Dana Ferris did not lie. And Dana Ferris did not panic. And when she asked for a week, it was because a week was exactly how long the truth needed to become safe to tell. Okay, he said. 1 week. He started the car. Piper called 4 times that night. Dana let all 4 go to voicemail. The 5th call, at 11:40, she finally answered. Because a 5th call at 11:40 from her sister usually meant something had actually gone wrong, rather than something Piper had merely decided was wrong. Everyone's talking about it, Piper said, without hello. Her voice had the particular brittleness of someone who has spent the last several hours discovering that a room's sympathy can turn corners faster than you expect. Caroline Averly barely said goodbye to me. Robert didn't say anything at all. Do you understand what you did tonight? What I did, Dana said. Piper, you announced my divorce to 200 people with a microphone. I was trying to be supportive. You went through my bag. Silence on the other end. Long enough that Dana understood her sister had, at some point in the last 4 hours, actually considered this fact and set it aside as unimportant, the way she'd set aside so many facts over the years that were inconvenient to the story she wanted to be living in. I was looking for a charger, Piper said finally, quieter. I saw the word petition. I saw both your names. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to ask me, Dana said. Privately, like a person who actually wanted to help, instead of a person who wanted an audience. That's not fair. Piper, you have never in your life asked me anything privately that you could instead announce. The line went quiet again. When Piper spoke next, her voice had shifted into the register Dana recognized from childhood, the one that came out only when Piper felt cornered rather than certain, thinner, faster, defensive in a way that tried to sound wounded instead. So what was it then? If it's not what I think, what is it? I can't tell you yet, Dana said, and I need you to sit with that. Because for once in your life, Piper, this isn't about you finding something out first. She hung up before her sister could answer. Marcus Odell's office smelled like old paper and the particular brand of drip coffee that lawyers who'd been practicing for 3 decades refused to upgrade out of loyalty. Dana and Theo sat across the desk from him on a gray Tuesday morning, 11 days after the party, while he walked them through the final closing documents for the second time. Slower this time, because Theo had a lot of questions he hadn't had the context to ask before. "Your father came to me 11 months ago," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the desk. The same kind of folder, Dana noted, that had caused so much damage at a party neither of them had wanted to think about since. He was 3 payments behind on the note held by Meridian Regional Bank. Once you're behind with them, they don't restructure. They sell the paper to whoever offers first, and the outfit that had been circling was Callaway Development. You know the strip they put up on Route 9 where the old bowling alley used to be? That's their model. Buy the note, foreclose, flatten, build something with a drive-through. He never told anyone, Theo said. He told me, Marcus said. Because I've known Walt Ferris since we were 19, and he once talked a county sheriff out of arresting me for something I 100% did. And he told Dana, because Dana was the one he trusted to figure out the money without telling him he couldn't figure it out himself. Marcus looked at Dana over his glasses. Your dad's proud. You know that better than I do. Dana nodded. She thought of every conversation with her father over the past 11 months, the careful lies about a consulting project, the late nights at the kitchen table with Theo running spreadsheets neither of them had the training for until they'd taught themselves, the actuarial modeling Dana did for a living finally useful for something that mattered more than an insurance company's quarterly numbers. They had formed Ferris Holdings LLC to buy the defaulted note directly from the bank before Callaway could, using savings that represented every extra dollar the two of them had put aside since their wedding, plus a personal loan Theo had quietly taken against his 401k that he hadn't even told his own parents about. They'd held the note themselves for 11 months while working with Marcus to get her father's store requalified for a conventional refinance under its own name. Invisible. From Walt Ferris's side of things, except for a bank statement that mysteriously stopped sending threatening letters. The refinance closed 9 days ago, Marcus said. Store's back in Walt's name, free and clear of Callaway or anybody else. All that's left is dissolving the shell entity you two used to hold the note since it's done its job. He tapped the folder, which is what you were signing the day of the party, and which is, I gather, the piece of paper that caused something of a scene. You could say that, Theo said. For what it's worth, Marcus said, I told your father the timeline. He knows the store's safe. He's been sitting in his office for a week, wondering how to tell your mother and Piper without either of them asking where the money came from. Dana looked at the folder. Ferris Holdings, LLC. Dissolution of entity. Printed clean across the front this time in a fresh copy. No ambiguity, no half-glimpsed caption to misread in a hurry between a phone charger and a stage cue. I think it's time he doesn't have to wonder anymore, she said. Walt Ferris cried in his own hardware store on a Thursday afternoon, standing between the paint mixer and a rack of ratchet sets, holding a copy of the refinance approval letter like it might dissolve if he gripped it too hard. Dana had asked Theo to wait in the truck. Some things, she thought, a daughter needed to say to her father alone. 11 months, Walt said, when he could talk again. You've been carrying this for 11 months, and you never once. You asked me not to tell anyone, Dana said. So I didn't tell anyone. I just also didn't let it happen. Your mother is going to kill me for not telling her. Your mother is going to be so relieved she forgets to be mad, Dana said. Give her a week. Walt set the letter down on the counter, next to a coffee can full of loose screws that had been sitting in that exact spot for as long as Dana could remember, and looked at his daughter the way he used to look at her when she was 9 years old and had just beaten him at chess for the first time without him letting her. A look that was part pride and part the particular. Startled respect a parent feels the moment they realize a child has become someone with capacities they never fully accounted for. Your sister, Walt said carefully, thinks you're going through a divorce. My sister told 200 people I was going through a divorce, Dana said. There's a difference between thinking something and broadcasting it with a microphone. Walt winced. She called me, after the party. Wanted to know if I knew anything. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about, which, God help me, was true, because I didn't know she'd said anything at all until your mother called me crying about it that same night. What did you tell Mom? That I trusted you, Walt said, and that whatever was in that folder, it wasn't the end of the world. Because you'd never let it be. Not for this family. I didn't know how right I was. Dana felt something in her chest loosen for the first time in 11 months. I need to ask you something, she said, and I want you to think about it before you answer, because it affects more than just you. Go ahead. The store's safe now. Nobody has to know how. But I think it's time everybody knows the store was ever in danger at all. And I think it should come from you, on your terms, not leak out sideways the way the rest of this has. Because right now, the story going around this family is that my marriage fell apart. And the actual story is that you almost lost everything you built. And I helped save it. And neither one of those is a story anybody should have to be ashamed of. Walt was quiet for a long moment, running his thumb along the edge of the counter the way he did when he was working something out that mattered. There's a Chamber of Commerce dinner in 3 weeks, he said finally. Small business recognition thing. I've been asked to say a few words about keeping the store going 40 years. I could say a few true words instead of a few polite ones. I think you should, Dana said. And I think Piper should be sitting in the front row when you do. Piper had spent the 11 days since the party in a state she was not accustomed to and did not know how to occupy gracefully, uncertain of her own position. Robert and Caroline Averly had not called. Their son Nathan, the boyfriend, the future she'd built 5 months of conversation around, had called twice, both times with a strained politeness that told her something had shifted in a house she'd never actually been welcomed fully into and had merely assumed she had. My parents think it was inappropriate, Nathan said on the second call, choosing his words like a man picking his way across ice. Announcing something like that about your own sister. In public. My mom actually said, and I'm just telling you what she said. Not what I think. She said it made her wonder what you'd say about our family someday, if it ever benefited you to say it. That's not fair, Piper said, for the second time in 2 weeks, to the second person who hadn't agreed with her. Maybe, Nathan said. But it's what she thinks, and my dad's on the hiring committee at Holloway. And I think you know as well as I do that the internship track runs through people liking you, not just being impressed by your grades. Piper hung up and sat in her apartment for a long time without turning on the lights, running the math on what she'd actually lost in exchange for 4 minutes of her room's attention. She had told herself, in the days since, a story where Dana had somehow provoked this, where the folder, whatever was actually in it, was Dana's fault for existing, for being cryptic, for making Piper look bad by making Piper's honest concern look like something ugly. It was a story that worked for about 11 days. It stopped working the morning her mother called to tell her about the Chamber of Commerce dinner, and mentioned, almost as an aside, that Dad wanted the whole family there, front row, because he had something he wanted to say. About what? Piper asked. I don't know, her mother said. But Dana knows. And Dana asked specifically that you be there. The Rotary Hall smelled like banquet chicken and burnt coffee. Folding chairs arranged in careful rows under a banner that said 40 years of Wexford hardware in letters considerably more modest than the ones that had hung over Piper's graduation tent. Walt Ferris stood at a podium that had clearly hosted the same 3 speeches on a rotation for a decade. In the good suit he wore to weddings and funerals, and Piper sat in the front row between her mother and Nathan, who had come, at her nervous, half-apologetic request, just to see, and had absolutely no idea what was about to happen. 40 years ago, Walt began. I opened that store with $11,000, a business loan my own father co-signed against his better judgment, and no idea what I was doing. A ripple of familiar laughter, the kind that comes from an audience that has heard variations of this speech at 3 previous dinners. I want to tell you all a little bit about the last year, because I think it matters more than the first. He told them. Not everything, Not the exact numbers, not Marcus's name, not the specifics of an LLC most of the room wouldn't have understood anyway, but enough. The missed payments, the bank's threats, the circling developer who wanted to turn 40 years of his life into a parking lot for a drive-through. And then, in a voice that cracked once and recovered, the daughter who had spent 11 months of her own money and her own sleep quietly buying back his mistakes before they could cost him everything, without ever once asking him to feel small for needing it. My daughter Dana, Walt said, and her husband Theo, saved this store. Not with a loan they asked me to be grateful for. Not with advice, with their own savings. And 11 months of silence. Because they understood something I think a lot of people forget. That helping somebody isn't supposed to come with an audience. The room turned, as rooms do, toward Dana, sitting 3 rows back beside Theo in the navy dress she'd worn to the graduation party. Because it was the only good dress she owned, and she'd stopped being embarrassed about that fact somewhere in the last 11 months. She hadn't expected applause. She got it anyway, genuine, sustained. The kind that comes from a room recognizing something true rather than something performed. Piper sat very still in the front row, watching her sister receive, without asking for it, exactly the kind of moment Piper had spent a lifetime engineering for herself. She felt something complicated move through her chest. Not only shame, though there was plenty of that, but something closer to recognition, the specific vertigo of watching someone you'd underestimated turn out to have been operating on a different, quieter frequency the entire time. Nathan leaned toward her. "That's not the story you told at your party," he said, not unkindly, just observing it. "No," Piper said, "it's not." After the applause settled and the caterers started clearing plates for coffee, Piper found Dana by the coat rack, both of them reaching for the same rack of folding chairs stacked against the wall, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. "I owe you an apology," Piper said finally. "A real one. Not the kind I gave you at the party, where I basically apologized for you being upset instead of for what I did." "That would be new," Dana said, "but there wasn't much edge in it. I went through your bag. I read 2 words and built an entire story, because the story I built made me feel like the good one. Like I was rescuing you." Piper's voice thinned. "And instead I humiliated you in front of 200 people, and almost humiliated Dad without even knowing it. Over a folder that actually said the opposite of what I decided it said." "You did," Dana said. "All of that happened. I know. And I need you to actually sit with why you did it," Dana said, "instead of just apologizing and moving on to whatever's next, because that's what you've always done. You've never had to sit with anything, Piper. You've always just talked your way to the next room before the consequences caught up." Piper looked down at the stack of chairs between them. "The Averleys barely speak to me now," she said quietly. "Nathan's mother told him she wonders what I'd say about their family if it ever benefited me. I lost the internship track at Holloway before I even had the interview, because apparently being unreliable with other people's private information is not a great look for someone hoping to be trusted with theirs." She looked up. "I've been sitting with it for 3 weeks, actually. Turns out it's a pretty uncomfortable place to sit." Dana studied her sister's face, genuinely studied it, the way she hadn't let herself in years. Past the practiced expressions and the performance for whatever room they happened to be standing in, and found, for the first time in a long time, something that looked less like a performance and more like an actual person figuring out something true about herself in real time. "I don't need you to grovel," Dana said. "I need you to actually change what you do the next time you think you've found something. Ask, privately, before you decide what it means." "I can do that," Piper said. "I want to do that." "Then that's enough for today," Dana said, and handed her sister half the stack of chairs to carry. 6 months later, on a bright Saturday in early spring, Wexford Hardware reopened its front section after a small renovation Walt had finally allowed himself to make with money that was, for once, entirely his own, new shelving, a wider aisle for the paint counter, a hand-lettered sign in the window that said 40 years A&D counting. Dana stood behind the register for a few hours that morning, the way she used to as a teenager, restocking washers into their little bins, while Theo carried in the last of the new shelving from the truck, and their two kids chased each other between the ladder aisles with the specific chaotic joy of children who have been promised ice cream if they behave for one more hour. Piper came by at noon with coffee for everyone and a card for their father that she'd actually handwritten instead of ordering something engraved, and stayed to help unpack a shipment of paint trays without being asked. Which was, Dana thought, its own small and unremarkable kind of proof that 6 months of sitting with something uncomfortable could occasionally produce a person who showed up, quietly instead of loudly. "I got the internship," Piper said, sliding a stack of trays into their display rack. "Smaller firm. Family law, actually. Turns out watching my own family almost implode over a piece of paper gave me a pretty specific interest." "That's good," Dana said, and meant it. "I'm sorry it took almost destroying everything for me to learn to ask a question before announcing an answer," Piper said. "Most people never learn it at all," Dana said. "Small mercies." Outside, through the front window, their father stood on the sidewalk in his old apron, talking to a customer about a paint color with the same unhurried patience he'd had 40 years ago, and would, Dana suspected, have for another 40 if his knees allowed it. The late afternoon light came in low and gold across the new shelving, across the hand-lettered sign, across a store that had almost disappeared quietly into a stack of foreclosure notices, and instead was still standing, because two people who loved him more than they needed credit for it had spent 11 silent months making sure he never had to know how close it came. Dana thought about the folder, still somewhere in a drawer in Marcus Odell's office, its work long finished, its 2 misread words responsible for one very bad night and, in the strange arithmetic families sometimes run, one very necessary reckoning. She thought about how the whole thing had started with her sister assuming the worst, because the worst made a better story to stand on a stage and tell. She thought that the truest thing about the last 6 months wasn't the store, or the money, or even the apology, finally properly given. It was simpler than that. It was her father, out on the sidewalk in the gold afternoon light, laughing at something a customer said, standing in front of a store he still owned free and clear, with no idea how close he'd come to losing it, and every reason left to believe, for the next 40 years, that some things you build quietly enough end up outlasting the people who tried to tear them down loudly. That was enough. It had always, quietly, been enough.